Wow. What's good? It's Woog. Jake Paul is about to fight Mike Tyson. Yeah, you heard that right. On July 20th in Arlington, Texas, Jake Paul is about to fight Mike Tyson. You know, when I saw this post early in the morning, I had to stare at it for about 2 to 3 minutes. I had to read the caption, then reread the caption. I think it was straight from Jake Paul, maybe on Instagram, but I stared at this thing for some time before I convinced myself, yeah, this is real. I look, upon first glance on this one, I can't say that I like this matchup at all. It's a bit interesting from the Jake Paul perspective because, you know, after fighting Anderson Silva, but before that he fought Tyron Woodley, before that he fought Ben Askren, Nate Robinson, he's gradually kind of stepped up in competition, fought MMA fighters, legendary MMA fighters, good striking MMA fighters, including Anderson Silva, arguably the greatest MMA striker of all time. Granted, Anderson Silva was in his late 40s by then. Then he had the loss. Jake Paul lost to Tommy Fury when they finally got in the ring after a couple, cancellations beforehand. Then he fights Nate Diaz. He drops him, I believe, multiple times, wins that via unanimous decision. That one is a 10-rounder. That was Jake Paul's first 10-rounder. And then he actually fights a couple of professional boxers. Tommy Fury was also a professional boxer. But basically, Jake Paul went off of the celebrity fight route and he went and fought a couple lower tier but professional boxers, knocked them both out in the first round. Andre August in December of 2023, and then Ryan Borland recently, just last weekend. So I'm thinking, okay, so what's he gonna do next? Is he finally gonna start fighting ranked professionals? Because quite frankly, I feel like that's where he should be based on what we're seeing. Like, we're seeing him fight these club level fighters, albeit Andre August, they said, had a good, he was like a former Golden Gloves champ, but it doesn't seem like the two, or if you count Tommy Fury, but I'm talking about his last two fights, that Jake Paul's professional opponents have been really good ones, right? I mean, they've got winning records, which, I mean, I've got to look at, Ryan Borland's background and see these fights where he won and developed this record, because it's like, damn, really? But Jake Paul has obviously been deeply devoted to building his skills in the boxing ring, like over the past, since 2020, I think 2020 is when he fought Anderson Gibb. And so he's been training hard and consistently for about 5 years now. And we're seeing the improvements. We're seeing his evolving jab. We're seeing his improving level of feinting and his level changing, looking low when going high. I mean, that's how he knocked Tyron Woodley out. That's how he dropped Ben Askren. He caught Nate Robinson coming in with that laser of a right hand. But we've also seen him start going to the body more, jabbing to the body pretty effectively, using his left lead hand to not only shoot the jab, but to throw nice hooks. Look at what he did against Nate Diaz. He used his left hand to throw some nice hooks there. So we're seeing an improving skill set on Jake Paul, which just makes this fight against Mike Tyson, it just seems inappropriate. Mike Tyson is 57 years old. Like, Anderson Silva was in his late 40s and he got dropped in the 8th and final round, I believe, against Jake Paul, if I remember correctly. He dropped Anderson Silva late. At least when Mike Tyson was fighting Roy Jones Jr., they were both in their 50s. This one between Paul and Mike Tyson, it feels like the high school jock beating up the football coach. It just doesn't seem appropriate. And the reason that this fight is happening is because this is a mega event, a huge event. This is going to be on Netflix, which I've had a couple conversations with a couple of, friends, family, and just people who pay attention to the combat sports space and also the streaming realm, the streaming world. Some people work for some of these streaming companies that I've been talking to, and we've been discussing, okay, so has Netflix truly developed the platform to stage an event like this? Or is it going to look like Triller or something like that, where it's like, okay, it's kind of an upstart who's kind of still getting their bearings in terms of being able to execute on the broadcast. Like, when we saw HBO and Showtime in the game, and even DAZN now has developed into a legitimate platform with a good, commentary team and good production overall. And same thing with ESPN and how they've kind of developed the infrastructure for boxing. I mean, ESPN has been doing boxing for years, but this particular top rank ESPN pairing, like when PBC was with Showtime, you could tell that it was a partnership with an actively involved broadcast partner and platform. Same thing with, Matchroom and Golden Boy's relationship with DAZN. I'm still not sure how PBC and Amazon Prime is going to work out. Like, what is the level of investment from Amazon Prime? I'm kind of wondering, okay, so what role is Netflix going to play? Who's going to be the broadcast team? Is MVP Promotions going to be handling all things broadcast and production? You know what I mean? And is Netflix just going to stage the platform, maybe do some advertising here and there? What is their level of involvement? So yeah, that's just something to keep your eye on. But in terms of the fight itself, they are making this a mega event. This is, I believe, a non-pay-per-view. And so again, Jake Paul is kind of veering off of that path that he's been on for the last 2 fights against legitimate boxers, because he said he wants to fight for a title, a legitimate title. I'm assuming a cruiserweight title, because that would fit his division, like in terms of where he is weight-wise and size-wise. So he wants to fight for an actual title, he says, and he's pretty hell-bent on fighting Canelo Alvarez. So these are things that Jake Paul wants to do. I'm not sure that this particular fight against Mike Tyson will get him there, but it's going to just draw a ton of eyeballs, because whatever buzz he lacked in his last couple of fights, because like this last one against Ryan Borland, it went off without a lot of US fanfare. Like, this wasn't nearly the type of promotion that was going into Jake Paul versus Nate Diaz or versus Tommy Fury, Tyron Woodley, and even Ben Askren on Triller. This wasn't the same type of. This kind of went under the radar. A lot of people didn't even know that Jake Paul was fighting last weekend. Like, he was on the undercard for Amanda Serrano, and that is how Jake Paul and MVP staged that. This was supposed to be a huge opportunity for Amanda Serrano to fight in front of her, Puerto Rican fans. This one against Mike Tyson puts us closer to the realm of versus Nate Diaz, Anderson Silva, and so forth. But it's Mike Tyson now. The one thing about Mike Tyson, he's got such legendary stature that it's almost like people aren't even caring that he's 57 years old. And it's almost like they're not even aware, or they've forgotten that he was losing to Kevin McBride back in 2005. This is 19 years ago that he's been looking bad. Tyson hasn't looked good, since he fought maybe Clifford Etienne back in 2003. That's 21 years ago. And that was right after his, knockout loss against Lennox Lewis. Mike Tyson hasn't been good, hasn't looked good in the ring for years now. Like, he lost to Danny Williams before losing to Kevin McBride. That was 2004 and 2005. Again, like 20 years ago. He didn't look great in that fight against Roy Jones. Yeah, it looked like he won. He was kind of hitting to Roy Jones' body, but it's tough to even really say whether they were trying to hurt each other in that fight. That almost seemed like a true celebrity event where they were kind of paying homage to each other as much as they were actually trying to fight each other. But even if you look at those post-fight interviews and you see like Roy Jones backstage, he looked like he was in a lot of distress, mostly to the body. He did not look like he was having a good time in there, to where Mike Tyson was kind of like, cheer up, man. You did all right. You did good, man. Be proud of yourself. Be proud of yourself. Roy Jones is like, I'm in a lot of pain. These guys are old men in a boxing ring at the end of the day. So yeah, Mike Tyson didn't look ferocious in the actual exhibition bout against Roy Jones Jr. And Roy Jones Jr. recently fought to a decision loss against Anthony Showtime Pettis. Now, I didn't think that Roy Jones really deserved the loss. I thought that it was pretty even, maybe edged to Roy Jones even. But just the fact that he fought a nearly even fight with Anthony Showtime Pettis, a far past prime, former lightweight champion. He was a lightweight. Anthony Pettis was a 155-pound champion in the UFC. And he was fighting Roy Jones at like 190 or however big Roy Jones was when they fought. And it was even. And that same Roy Jones went the 8-round, 2-minute, 8-round distance against Mike Tyson. Jake Paul has been like trying to hurt people lately. And he's been fighting in fights where they are trying to hurt people. Jake Paul envisions himself like a real bona fide boxer at this point. Like, I feel like YouTuber boxing, I feel like those days, as it pertains to Jake Paul, those days are over. He's at least shown. Look, you don't beat Anderson Silva by being a funny, quirky celebrity. No, you gotta you put in work. Same thing with knocking out Tyron Woodley in the vicious way that he did in that rematch. And again, we're seeing new wrinkles in Jake Paul's game. I'm seeing the high school jock beating up the old elderly football coach in that one. And that is no disrespect to the legendary Mike Tyson. I love Mike Tyson. I remember being worried about Mike Tyson like 15 to 20 years ago, thinking like, man, is he going to meet an early demise? I just felt like he was going to have a tragic ending based on how his life trajectory around that time, coupled with like tragic events like the death of his daughter. I remember being sincerely worried about Mike Tyson. The fact that he's turned his life around to this degree where look at all the businesses that he's building. Look at how he's become like a beloved ambassador of the sport. Like, you know, he has, and it's a well-documented turnaround. That is nothing short of inspiring. I love how Mike Tyson's story has developed over the past decade plus. It's been a beautiful thing to witness. I don't want to see this 57. He's going to be 58 when he enters the ring against Jake Paul. I don't want to see him get beaten up by Jake Paul. I didn't want to see Anderson Silva get beaten up by Jake Paul. If you would have told me 3 years ago that Jake Paul would have been dropping and beating Anderson Silva, oh my, where do I put my money to bet against that? That is how unusual the Jake Paul story has been. But yeah, I don't like this fight, but I get it. This is a huge money-making opportunity for both guys. So Mike Tyson, I'm sure, loves making money. Jake Paul, obviously and evidently loves making money. And I mean, you want to talk about the marketing genius. Again, he is retrieving and regaining whatever buzz he lost by going that kind of purist, fight the professional, no-name opponent, Andre August, Ryan Borland type of fight. I was impressed that Jake Paul even did that. I'm looking at these matchups like, I thought Andre August had a legit shot against Jake Paul. And maybe joke's on me. Maybe I'm like look, I'm still assuming that these are actual non-rigged events and fights that are organically taking place. I'm still on the side of that. I know a lot of people think that some of the Jake Paul story is rigged. I tend to not think that. I feel like if it was rigged, then why would Jake Paul and Tommy Fury all of a sudden be like a real fight where Jake Paul loses and they don't run it back immediately? So I'm giving this whole scenario the benefit of the doubt. And I think that Jake Paul is really doing this to these guys. Ryan Borland, Andre August, Nate Diaz, and so forth. I think that he's actually doing this. So the fact that he's going off of that fight the actual boxer, or at least active boxer, and then fighting Mike Tyson for arguably, I mean, this might end up being Jake Paul's biggest payday. We'll see how the promotion ensues and how the event goes down, but I'd imagine there's going to be a lot of viewership and they're both going to make a ton of money in this one. And Mike Tyson, again, he's just such a beloved legend that I feel like all it really takes is for a couple like 10 to 15 second clips of Mike Tyson working a heavy bag or just shadow boxing for a few vicious seconds to get people to say, aha, Mike Tyson's back. Yeah. I feel like the mystique is still there somehow at 57 years old, that people are willing to just imagine the unimaginable and to think that, oh yeah, he could turn back the clock. Again, they forgot about how he looked against Roy Jones, how he looked against Kevin McBride, Danny Williams, how he's looked at any time we've seen him in an actual competition over the past 2 decades. It's almost like people are willing to just suspend belief and to think, aha, Mike Tyson. They look at him like they've never looked at any 57-year-old ever. Like anything is possible with this guy because of the early history of Mike Tyson. I mean, he was such a monumental force in the late 80s, mid to late 80s, into the 90s. He lost to Buster Douglas in 1990. But even when he had his first comeback, when he was incarcerated for those 3 or so years, and then he came back to fight Peter McNeely, Buster Mathis, Frank Bruno, won the title against Bruce Seldon before the mega fight against Evander Holyfield, not the ear-biting one, but the really good fight where Tyson was the huge favorite. Evander Holyfield ended up pulling off the great legendary upset with an 11th round stoppage, and it was in the rematch immediately after where Mike Tyson bit his ear. But that whole era, and again, late 80s especially, when Mike Tyson was the feared heavyweight champion, that was so mega, and the story is so legendary that it's carried into 3+ decades later to where some people will still get excited about Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson. But again, I feel like it's inappropriate for a very young, physical, pretty talented, very motivated, ambitious, hard training Jake Paul to be fighting the 50 at the time of the fight, 58-year-old Mike Tyson. But yeah, let me know your thoughts, your early thoughts on this one. I will do a breakdown for what it's worth on this one as we near the fight date, but let me know what your early thoughts are. Anytime I want to use the word "it's sad," that would imply that Mike Tyson needed the money. If Mike Tyson was kind of still, if he was still struggling life-wise, not to say that he's not, like, you know, internally, or I don't know what he goes through on the day-to-day. I know that his presentation of his life and what he's showing us as a public figure has been nothing short of remarkable, professional, all kinds of things. Like, again, Mike Tyson is about as beloved a fighter in the fight game right now as there is, active or inactive. And he's, again, a great ambassador to the sport. He usually gets the loudest cheer in the big fights where they flash to different people in the crowd. Usually Mike Tyson has the biggest cheer, regardless of whoever else is in the house. That says something, and that makes me happy. I like that. I like that for Mike Tyson. I like that for the overall sport, because, you know, what he did in the late 80s was truly remarkable, and I don't know if we've seen something quite like that since. He was arguably the biggest figure in sports, let alone combat sports. Like, he was arguably the biggest name in sports. It would be a short list of maybe him, Michael Jordan, I don't know, Wayne Gretzky. It was very, very few, but Mike Tyson was that guy. And again, it's carried into the modern era. But again, I don't want to use the word sad, because Mike Tyson, I think, is doing very well financially. And this appears to be a choice that Mike Tyson and Jake Paul are making. I just don't I just don't love the matchup, and I don't love Mike Tyson's chances, believe it or not. I don't know. It's crazy for me to even hear myself say these words out loud, but I would probably favor Jake Paul to beat Mike Tyson. Again, 57, 58, it don't lie. I mean, and I'm having flashbacks of Evander Holyfield versus Vitor Belfort. Oh my goodness. You want to talk about something. Now, to me, that did seem sad. Not that Evander Holyfield needs the money, I hope. Well, I don't know. He's had some reported financial struggles over the years, but I hope he's doing okay financially. But just to see somebody as revered as Evander, the real deal Holyfield, in there like that against Vitor Belfort. You know what I would have liked to see in the celebrity crossover boxing realm? Jake Paul versus that Vitor Belfort. Vitor Belfort is one of the best strikers in MMA history, especially with the hands, specifically fast hands, for a pretty ferocious puncher. They're about the same size. Vitor's competed everywhere from 185 to heavyweight. You mostly between 185 and 205, but he's dabbled in heavy, or he's at least fought heavyweights in the organizations that allowed for those indiscriminate weight class types of fights. Vitor Belfort is an UFC OG too, before they had weight classes. You know, like the first time I ever saw Vitor Belfort was like in the UFC, like it might have been like 7 or 8, very early, but he just wiped the floor with Tank Abbott, who was clearly a heavyweight, like a big heavyweight, you know? But yeah, Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson, I don't love it. Jake Paul versus Vitor Belfort, I don't know if that ship has sailed in terms of where Vitor Belfort is athletically right now, but I would have been interested in that one. But hell, I didn't expect Jake Paul to beat Anderson Silva. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on this one. I'm just kind of sharing my immediate reaction to the news. Again, I had to stare at that graphic for like a couple of minutes for it to really sink in. Like, oh my God, they're really gonna do this. They are doing that. And you know, people were wondering, where's Jake Paul gonna go next? Again, is he gonna fight a ranked fighter? Well, no, he's gonna fight arguably the biggest celebrity in the whole combat sports space, Mike Tyson. So there's your answer. Let me know what your early thoughts are. Do you like the fight? Do you see it as being competitive? How many rounds? I don't know how many rounds this is going to be. I don't know if this is an actual fight versus an exhibition. Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones Jr. was an exhibition. It was 8 rounds, 2-minute rounds. Again, Jake Paul's coming off of, 3-minute 8-round fights, the last 2, and before that against Nate Diaz was a 10-rounder. I doubt that this is going to be 10 3-minute professional rounds. So if you have more information or any guesses on what that's going to be, let me know. Obviously, the longer the fight goes, the more it probably favors Jake Paul. Mike Tyson might be dangerous for the first 2 minutes for the entire fight. You know what I mean? Or maybe the first 2 minutes of the first round, and then maybe the first 30 to 45 seconds of the second round, the first 15 to 20 seconds of the third round, and maybe that's about it. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on this one. And am I underestimating Mike Tyson? I don't think I am, but let me know your thoughts. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.